Hello dolls, and welcome back to another video. Today I would like to give you some 1960s film recommendations. These are some of my favorite films. I'm going to share a little bit of the synopsis with you and then obviously why I like these films. I have my tea here to be comfortable, my notebook, because I wrote a couple of things down. Yeah, this is one of the questions I generally get the most. If you're new here, hi, I'm Emma, first of all. My credentials to do this, I'm a huge fan of the 1960s, but I also do have a background in filmmaking. I used to be a prop master, and during COVID, I watched about 3 films every single day. When I say watching, and when I talk about watching movies, it's usually films from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I just have a thing for old films, but I especially love the 1960s. And so here are some recommendations. Some of them are very well-known films, and some of them I feel like are just not talked about enough because they are great movies. But yeah, I figured I would give you some ideas on what to watch if you love 1960s films or you want to get into 1960s films. I also made this cup myself, painted it myself. It was already made. But I love it. Yeah, but let's get into this. So we're gonna start with a pretty obvious one. The Graduate. The Graduate, 1967 film. It was directed by Nichols. He actually won an Academy Award, an Oscar for Best Director that year. And it very famously stars Dustin Hoffman, kind of like broke off his career, and Bancroft and Katharine. One thing about this film that is fantastic is the soundtrack. It was written by Simon and Garfunkel. Mrs. Robinson goes back to this film. Sound of Silence, all these wonderful songs play a huge role in the film and definitely make the film even better. But what is the film about? It's about this young guy, Benjamin, who just graduated college. He's 21 and he just doesn't know what to do with his life. And he goes back to his parents, who are very wealthy. They live in California, and he just kind of like hangs around there until he meets Mrs. Robinson, who's the wife of his dad's business partner. And they start to have an affair, and Mrs. Robinson is kind of like painted to be the age of his parents. The affair kind of like spirals because at some point Benjamin meets the daughter of Mrs. Robinson, Elaine, and he falls in love with her. She's very beautiful, very wonderful, and the mother isn't really happy about this. And then there's this famous, I don't want to take away too much, but there's this famous final frame of him and her in their wedding attire, and they're sitting at the back of the bus and just driving away. There are several reasons why I love this film. First of all, it's a classic. It's a very defining film for the late 1960s, and I do think it has a very modern topic. I feel like it's a very known thing for people of any age at any time, that after you graduate you don't really know what to do, and I think that that is a very well-known feeling, and that is why that film feels very timeless. There is an awkwardness to the film. So the fact that Dustin Hoffman is playing a 21-year-old, if you're wondering, he's 29 in the film, like he was 29 when filming it. But it gets even wilder because, first of all, Dustin Hoffman doesn't really pass as 21. He doesn't. I'm sorry, you cannot change my mind about that. But what is even wilder is that the woman portraying Mrs. Robinson and Bancroft was only 36 when filming. So she was nowhere near his parents' age, or he was nowhere near the age that his parents should be or could be. And that does make it a little awkward because she's like portrayed as an older woman, but she's not. And it also kind of like plays into that bias of a woman at 36 is like an older woman, but a man at almost 30 is still a young man. And I don't think that that translates. Like, you can clearly see that these two are somewhat the same age, but it's a little quip that makes the film even more funny, to be honest. It's a great film. It's my second favorite film about age gap relationships, I would say, because Harold and Maude is like a little more on top, but that's a 70s film, which, by the way, if you want me to make this video about 70s films, let me know. But yeah, Mrs. Robinson, The Graduate, it's generally a really good film, and I think it's definitely a film worth watching. Moving on with another classic, Bonnie and Clyde. I feel like Bonnie and Clyde is very well known. Everyone kind of knows the story, but the 1967 film is extra great. 1967, you're gonna hear a lot in this video because in my opinion it was a great year for cinema. But yeah, it is directed by Arthur Penn, very famously starring Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Gene Hackman, and Estelle Parsons, who actually won the Oscar. But even more interesting is that this film was edited by Dee Allen. Dee Allen was a very revolutionary cutter. She was an editor, one of the first women in film editing, and she has this really great style and really great way of adding to a film. I absolutely adore it. And she actually went on to cut Dog Day Afternoon a couple years later, another really good film. Obviously, the story of Bonnie and Clyde is very well known. It's about the Depression era bank robbers, Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow. The film is just about their violent killing spree, kind of like across the Midwest, but it's also a love story. And I think that this duality of action and killing and love story is something that works really well in film in general, but with Bonnie and Clyde in particular. It's the blueprint for a lot of these films nowadays. However, when Bonnie and Clyde was first released in 1967, it was quite controversial. It was something completely new. People hadn't seen this before, and this whole rebellion type of film that was so popular in the 60s definitely did have a lot of its starting point in Bonnie and Clyde. I also love the fashion. I feel like a lot of those styles were also popular in the 60s, the way that berets were worn. It's just a really cool film. It is safe to say Bonnie and Clyde changed Hollywood forever. That film ushered in a whole new era, the era generally known as New Hollywood, and these films were completely new. There was kind of like a shift away from the classic studio productions toward an era where films could be violent, they could be sexy and morally ambiguous, and Bonnie and Clyde laid the groundwork for a lot of that. I honestly love this film because it is classic, it is beautiful, it is shocking, it is so stylish, there's something so fashionable about it, and I think it does have a certain appeal because, to be honest, it's a film so largely referenced and it's just a story that will never die. Alright, this film, I've spoken about it several times before. It's the year 1966 and Michelangelo Antonioni bursts onto the scene with his first English language film, Blow Up. Now, Blow Up is a film about a photographer. We all know it's kind of like loosely based on David Bailey, the way that he's portrayed and everything, but the idea is I just lost an earring, but the idea is so great. I think that the idea behind this film is one of the greatest ideas ever behind a film, because the plot is basically there's this young photographer who has taken pictures in a park, and he comes back home and he gets them developed, or he develops them himself, and he sees something that might be a crime in the back of his pictures, and he gets really obsessed with it and he's trying to solve that crime, and it is just so brilliantly made because it is so he gets so lost in it, and it's also such a fashionable film. Of course, the name Blow Up refers to him blowing up the pictures, like he enlarges them really large and he tries to solve that murder because he thinks that he has proof for it in the back of his picture. However, what is so great about this film, and there are spoilers in this video just so you know, what is so great about this film is the fact that it never gets resolved. I love films with an open ending. Some people find it very dissatisfying, but I find it brilliant because it basically opens the door for you to leave the cinema, or whenever you stop playing the film, you can just kind of like, at the end of it, spin the rest of the story in your mind, and I love that. Obviously, Blow Up was a huge success. It also started the careers of some of our 60s favorites like Jane Birkin, Verushka, they're all in it. And it also just shows London at its cultural peak in the 1960s. It's a time when fashion, music, and art collided, and it is so thrilling. It also has cameos of the Yardbirds who play a little bit, and it's the way that this film balances the unease of that murder with the beauty of these beautiful models that he's photographing and staging, and he's very particular with it, but he gets so obsessed with this murder. It's just a great film, honestly. Next up, I have said this many times before, you have to kind of separate the art from the artist in this case. My next film is Rosemary's Baby, 1968, directed by Roman Polanski. Now, Roman Polanski, very controversial person. I have to say he's one of my favorite directors. I separate him as the artist from his art. I think Rosemary's Baby is one of the best films, famously starring the beautiful Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, and Ruth Gordon, who actually ended up winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Now, I'm usually not the biggest fan of horror films because I cannot quite take it. However, Rosemary's Baby is so good. It's the best horror film in my opinion because it is so tense and so unsettling. It's basically about this young couple and they move into a new apartment and they have these neighbors, this elderly couple who they think is a little odd but nothing too weird about them. They're just kind of like, okay, they're a little weird but whatever. And then one night they invite them over for dinner, and when Rosemary eats the dessert, it's like a chocolate dessert, she's like, this kind of tastes weird, and she tells her husband and he's like, it's gonna be fine, just eat it. And when she eats it, she has this kind of like dream of being unconscious and the devil being there and everything, but she kind of plays it off because she's like, I must have just imagined that, I must have just fallen asleep. And then she finds out she's pregnant, which they have been trying for a baby for a while, but she starts to think that the baby is the devil, and then the whole backstory about the neighbors and everything comes back in, and it's about this woman whose paranoia just grows, and she's paranoid of her baby, and it is fantastic. It's such a fantastic film. It's a psychological thriller, it's a horror film. It is incredible. Mia Farrow is wonderful. Ruth Gordon is so good. What a phenomenal film, honestly. It is horror in the most stylish way. You have to understand that this film, there's not a lot of blood, there's no monster, there's no gore. It's just Mia Farrow in her very mod haircut and all these mod mini dresses, but it is horror within that, and that is wonderfully brilliant to me. Honestly, it's top tier, one of the best films in my opinion ever made. Moving on with another classic, 2001 A Space Odyssey, directed by the one and only Stanley Kubrick. It's my second favorite Kubrick film, I'm gonna say. I do prefer Clockwork Orange. This film is very dystopian. It's basically about a crew of astronauts and their supercomputer, HAL. And he's kind of like navigating them. You get a feeling that something's off, and it kind of like turns out that that computer is evil and he's killing them all. And there's this really cool scene where one of the astronauts, his name is David, I believe, kind of like he's at the gate and he has this kind of like daydream experience, but it's also kind of real, of like a cosmic rebirth. It is very 1960s space age. It is very surreal. It does have a psychedelic twist to it almost, but it is very sterile because it plays in that very narrow place of that spaceship. And what I love about it is that you have the inside of the spaceship, which is so narrow, and they're there with their computer, but then they're obviously outside in space, so there's like so much room everywhere, and they feel so lonely, and it's just such a good film. And it is, I mean, we're now talking a lot of AI and all of these things, and it definitely has a feel of that. Like, it's a very dystopian film. I once got the chance to go and visit the sets. Like, they still have a lot of the build things and like a lot of the props, which was so great for me coming from that background. And it was really eerie because these pieces are so old, and it's often like the case with film props, they're stored in like a colder climate. And so we went in, it was super cold, it was kind of like gloomy in there, but it was a great experience overall. To me, 2001 isn't just a film, it's a visual experience. You have the music, you have obviously the visuals that are so great, you have that groundbreaking film that definitely changed the sci-fi genre forever, and it is phenomenal. It's such a good film. I think a lot of people say it's one of the best films ever made, and I wouldn't argue with that. Next up, a very light one, 1964, The Beatles Make a Hard Day's Night, directed by Richard Lester, which I actually have another one of his films on the list, but more on that later. Very famously starring the Beatles and Pattie Boyd. And this film kind of like predates a lot of the mockumentaries that you see now. It shows the Beatles 36 hours before a television gig. and basically just what goes down. It is filled with screaming fans, fun train rides, little escapades. It has a lot of wit and a lot of charm. And then obviously all of the musical numbers, it's just Beatlemania in its purest form. What I love about this film is that a lot of the Beatles' personality shines through. They are not professional actors. We all know Ringo tried to have an acting career and that didn't really go the best way, but they're really good because they have a real chemistry, and that translates from the film to the viewer, and that makes for a really great experience. It is pure joy packed in black and white Beatlemania. It is fantastic, it's wonderful, and it's just fun. It's a light film to just watch when you want to have a good time. Moving on, next on the list, Andy Warhol's 1966 Chelsea Girls. Chelsea Girls, directed by Andy Warhol and Paul Morrissey, has a really interesting technique because for the entirety of the film there is a split screen. So basically you watch one film on one side, and then on like the left side it's one film, on the right side another film is playing. But it's all inside the factory. It's like the different people, mostly the girls. It's also in the Chelsea hotel, and it's just that crowd of people. There's no real story, nothing to it. It's just an experimental film. It's over 3 hours long, I believe. It is weird to watch, but it is also great to just see people uncut, just doing their thing. There's something... It almost feels like you're stepping back into the factory, like you're being part of the crowd for a day, and that is really cool. It's about drug use, there's gossip, there are breakdowns, but it does feel very, very real after all. This was also Warhol's first mainstream success, and it definitely helped to propel underground cinema in general into the mainstream a little more. I like it because, as said, it feels like peering through a little keyhole. You're just watching these people do their thing. It is raw, it is messy, it's intoxicating. Nico is there with her cold beauty, there's music, there's everything. It's the 1960s underground burnt into celluloid. And I love it because it isn't polished, it isn't perfect, but it is utterly alive. Exactly the way that I imagine it must have felt to spend a day back then in the factory. Moving on, in 1967 we have Privilege. Privilege, directed by Peter Watkins, is a sci-fi musical, I want to say. It's about this guy, it's like a dystopian near future. His name is Stephen Shorter, and he's a pop star, rock star, superstar, and he becomes a state-controlled kind of like messiah figure almost. It is an odd film, but it does work. It is filmed as if it was a documentary, but it clearly isn't. Like, it's very obviously scripted, but it also does kind of feel like a documentary at points. Jean Shrimpton plays this beautiful girl who kind of falls in love with him, and she's like, my parents have this house on the countryside and you need to get out of here. And it's just, I don't know, it's a great film. It is so wild and so weird because something about this tortured man who's like being used for mind control almost is singing songs. It's odd, but that is what I like about it. It's an odd film. I don't think it would have been made today, and I don't think it would work today, but it does work. It still works in that kind of like weird spot that made 1960s cinema. I love it because it is eerie, prophetic. It's about celebrity culture, it's about mass control, and it's about merging entertainment with politics, something that I think is very modern right now. We have Jean Shrimpton, she's beautiful, you have the songs, it's just perfect, it's a great time. Next up, a French film, La Piscine, 1969, Jacques Deray directed it. It stars Alain Delon, Romy Schneider, Maurice René, and Jean Birkin, and this is about a couple going on holiday on the French Riviera, Romy Schneider and Alain Delon, and they just kind of like lounge around the pool. A lot of the film takes place around the pool. La piscine means pool in French, and so that's kind of where the name comes from. And they just have a great time, and then Marianne's ex-lover Harry arrives, and he brings along his teenage daughter, played by Jane Birkin. And Alain Delon's character falls in love with her, and it's just this whole love triangle, but it is great. La Piscine is one of the most sensual films about the 1960s. It has sweat, it has water, it has sun, It has great costumes, great actors and actresses. The chemistry between Romy Schneider and Alain Delon is fantastic. It works so well, and then Jane Birkin comes in and she embodies such an innocence. It just works. It's a great film. It's beautiful to just simply look at it, but it's also great because the story is timeless and it is really good. I like it because it feels so heartbreaking and dangerous at times, but against the most beautiful backdrop. And that is truly what makes this film. Next up, 1968's The Girl on the Motorcycle. A Marianne Faithfull classic, also starring Alain Delon actually. It was actually directed by Jack Cardiff, who had made a name for himself as a cameraman before that, a cinematographer, and it lives off of these very psychedelic colors. It's very vivid, it's beautiful. It's about a newly married girl played by Marianne Faithfull. She impulsively just leaves her husband and drives off on a motorcycle, and that is basically the entire story. There's not a lot of story, but she decides to take the motorcycle across Europe to visit her lover, played by Alain Delon, and it is great. The film kind of cuts between her physical journey and her emotional journey. Marianne Faithfull is beautiful. She looks so hot in that outfit on the motorcycle. It's visually stunning. The psychedelic dreamscapes, the reckless passion and love, it's so 1968. It's perfect. I say this a lot about these films, but this is, as said, my top tier films from the 60s, and I love all of them, but this one also has a special place in my heart. Next up, Daisies, 1966, not a British or French film or American like most of the films on this list. It is directed by Vera Chytilova, which I hope is how I pronounce her name. My son's also here, that's who I said hi to. It's part of the Czech New Wave. New Wave was a big thing in the 60s. It's kind of like new idea and approach to filmmaking. Daisies is phenomenal. It's about two young women. They're both named Marie, and they decide that the world is spoiled and the world is coming to an end, but why shouldn't they be spoiled too? And they just kind of like decide to live their life as lavishly and as outrageously as possible. There are elaborate feasts. There is this dreamy dance scene. There are so many great scenes. It's visually so perfect, and it's unreal, but it's also, it feels so real. It's brilliantly made. It's phenomenally directed. It's joyous anarchy, and I adore it. It's political, but it's also playful. It's about two young women gleefully tearing apart every single expectation. I love it because it feels like pure rebellion, but it's also art. It's messy, it's colorful, it's fearless, and in the end, it's simply unforgettable. We have a little visitor. But moving on with another 1968 film, and another film directed by Richard Lester, Petulia. Petulia is starring Julie Christie, George C. Scott, and Richard Chamberlain, and it does have cameos by my favorite Janis Joplin and Big Brother and the Holding Company, which is honestly so great. It shows them in their purest form, and it is fantastic. The film is about Petulia. She's a free-spirited San Francisco socialite who begins an affair with a middle-aged doctor. That kind of like glazed the groundwork. As said, age-gap films had a really big time in the late 60s and early 70s. They definitely had their moment there. Their relationship is set against the backdrop of 1960s San Francisco, obviously, and the entire spirit that there was. The concerts, the charity galas, but also the entire new feeling that kind of came up in the late 60s in San Francisco. Nicholas Roeg, who did the cinematography, has this really interesting style of editing. He also did a lot of the editing for the film himself, and it's kind of like fractured, which definitely was one of his trademarks, and it works really well for this film. In the end, you kind of come to realize that beneath Petulia's story of glamour is a story of abuse, and it's about a society losing its innocence, which is really interestingly made, and it's almost heartbreaking when you finally realize what is actually going on with Petulia. I love it because it is hauntingly beautiful. Julie Christie drifts through San Francisco in Ozzie Clark dresses, and Janis Joplin sings. There's Nicholas Roeg's interesting style of cutting. There's a lot going on, but it all comes out to be this beautiful symphony of late 1960s countercultural beauty. I have a couple of honorable mentions that I feel like have to be here because they do deserve their spot. One of them would be Breathless, the 1960s French classic. It is beautiful. It's such a good film. I feel like Breathless is the classic French film of the 60s. It's Jean-Luc Godard. It's perfect. It's set a little earlier than the other films. I think it is from 1960, but it is so visually stunning and it's such a classic. Everyone knows it. Everyone who knows a little bit about films knows it, and everyone who loves old cinema loves it because it's a great film. It is so fast and so beautiful, and the storyline is great. The acting is beautiful. I love it. Next honorable mention, Lolita. Don't have to say a lot about it. I feel like the title is self-explanatory. It's another good one, but it's also a little heartbreaking. Planet of the Apes, a classic. I'm not too big on sci-fi, if I'm being fully honest, but Planet of the Apes undeniably is one of the greatest sci-fi films of all times. There is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then also obviously everything Hitchcock. Psycho is great, The Birds is great. I also like The Trip a lot. It's kind of like an honorable mention here, but as said, if you want more parts, I can break down more of the 60s film for you, or if there's like a film you want me to talk more about, I love it. I could talk about films forever, just let me know. And then obviously, because what would the 60s be without it? Easy Rider. What a great film. Easy Rider is also largely considered the film that broke off New Age cinema for America. But yeah, that is it. I thought that this was a fun little video. It's a little chaotic because my son is here and he's just kind of like hanging out. He's a little sick, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. It supports me, it supports the channel, and it would truly mean the world. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing. I upload new videos all about the 60s and 70s every single week, and I would love to have you around. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye dolls! Bye!
Hi.